Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I'm Courtney Anderson. This is the 220th episode of this show, and our show today is part of the Meeting Mayhem series. And of course, this is our series where we're talking about meetings. Meetings! But meetings are not mundane. Meetings are marvelous. And specifically, we're talking about meetings and the mayhem that may result when we're not implementing all of the practices and tools that we can. So here we are, and our show specifically today is future oriented in some aspects. So in our Meeting Mayhem series, our show today here in episode 220 is virtual meetings and time zone treatment. Virtual meetings and time zone treatment. And I said in a way it's future oriented in that, hey, wherever I am right now physically, I'm on planet Earth or beyond, there's another place. And there are people in another place at this exact same moment that are in a future time. They may be a whole day or more ahead of the day of the calendar that I'm in. So in that way, it's exciting. Time zones are exciting. Time zones take us to the future and the past. I love time zones. One of the coolest things I like about traveling by air is you get on a plane, right? And wherever. And then you get off that plane. I think the longest trips I've done a nonstop was the 16-hour from the States to South Africa. And then I did 14 hours and 45 minutes from the States, from the Newark, New Jersey airport to Mumbai. Okay. So you think, oh, a 14-hour and 45-minute flight's kind of long. But then you think, not really, because like a day is 24 hours, so it's not even anywhere near that. And I've gone longer distances with multiple flights, right? Like between Australia and wherever, but but then you take a flight, take a break, lay over, another flight. But even like 12 hours. 12 hours I can be in Japan and wake up there and then be in the States, or I can start off in Africa and end up in Europe. I mean, I think it's just cool. I really do, because you think of all of human history before the invention of the technology relatively recently that allows us to do this, right? I'm going to go and get in this mechanical item, and then it's going to fly in the air. I can go massive amounts of distance, and it's really interesting. And I think I really do enjoy all of that. And it always is a little, like I said, it reminds you how relative all of this is, right? Time and speed. And it's just amazing, because I left and I was in one place and it was one time, and I'm here and it's maybe a different day. It's a different time. And it's only been a few hours, right? That's cool. It's exciting, and I'm appreciative every single time that I get to experience something like that, because how many humans in our history before our modern era would have really enjoyed this, but just the technology just wasn't there. And I'm sure humans in the future will look back on what we do and think, oh, it's too, look at what they missed out on, right? But I'm happy to be experiencing what I experience now, and I still think it's really kind of just exciting. The reality of all of that means that in our Meeting Mayhem, we're specifically talking about virtual meetings and time zones. The time zone issue doesn't really apply when we're having a physical synchronous meeting, because if we're all in the same physical space, like we're all in the same room, then we're usually in the same time zone. Now, maybe we're located in a room, it's on the very edge of like a time zone demarcation line, and so maybe part of the room, if it was big enough, you could imagine, right? So like literally that room sits on the line of the time zone change. It's possible, but even in that, it's still going to be close. It's not going to be, several time zones away, because geographically we're all in the same place. right? So the time zone issue really comes up when we began to expand our meeting opportunities through virtual meetings, whether they're conference calls, voice, whether they're the video call, it's on a phone system, or on an internet-based system, which is rapidly more common. The challenge when we have this, I believe, really fantastic opportunity that I can make a long distance phone call, and I can make a long distance, what we used to refer to as a long distance video call. And it's so easy. The hardware for this is just, it's ubiquitous. Smartphones and tablets and wearable computers, and it's just awesome. And that when I was growing up, none of this existed in the public sphere. None of it was even really something people thought about, right? Even when you look back and you listen and you access the debate about personal computers, and many very bright and successful people said, why would any regular person want a computer at their house? That's like the stupidest thing ever. What are they going to do with it? Well, now you look back and you think, well, what do you mean? Of course, I need a computer. It's a modern interpretation. And even before the internet, you might have had a computer, but it sort of functioned like a word processor, and maybe put some video games on it at a very rudimentary level. With the internet, it's opened up all this opportunity to do all this other stuff, right? I can communicate with people around the world, and it then means that the hardware, coupled of course with the software and the access, is just incredibly important. But it isn't something that at the time, and people made the argument like, why does this is stupid? No one's ever going to buy a computer for their house. Like, they're not a business. What are they going to do with it? That it wasn't a stupid conclusion, right? Because nobody had one before, and so it doesn't make any sense. I remember when I was when car phones, so before the mobile phone, people would carry mobile phones around. Before that, there were these things called car phones, what it sounded like. But it was like a phone with like a cord that was like wired into the car, and it was something that only, I assume very wealthy people, or maybe people that were in that industry had. And the idea was just similar to the computer. Why would anyone need this? You have a car, you drive around, you need a phone, there's a payphone, right? Like, what would you need a car phone? Much less an idea that you would literally carry a phone with you. It just sounds silly. But now, of course, I've gone through and experienced it. Well, of course, now people say I need it. Even little children there's a discussion. People say, well, my child needs it. What if my child's in an emergency and they need to contact me? Of course they need it. So these things are that's nature of all of that. All of that sort of, it's not necessarily a digression, but it's to try to make the argument that the fact that the time zone issue comes up in virtual meetings isn't something that's been uniformly handled perfectly in every setting. That's because it's so new. Like, normally you set a meeting, okay, I got to find an office to have the meeting, and then I got to, invite people to the meeting, and the people are going to come to the meeting, make sure, people are parking for the meeting if they're coming from another place, make sure that maybe there's a snack at the meeting. But you never had to sit and think about time zones. It's just stupid. Now you do. Right? And my argument with all that sort of narrative is that all these things happen, and depending on your age and your experience in life, it seems like it just happened. And especially if you're somebody that's been working, and you were working and you were doing meetings for, a long time in your career, and now all of a sudden you're supposed to think about time zones you never did before, it's totally reasonable that this is not something that is integrated into the thought process as it would be for somebody who's new to a career and who's always dealt with distributed attendees. So that's the point that I'm making. So the time zone issue, again, it's something that you're reminded of it again every time you physically travel from place to place, especially great distances, relatively speaking. And you're reminded of it when you are interacting with people who aren't in other locations. The reality, though, is not everybody does that. Not everybody's been on planes and started in one time zone in one place and gone to another one. There's a lot of people who haven't done that at all. So it makes it then a little bit more abstract for them, right? And these are the types of things like time. Again, we know. I mean, we study in school as a child, sort of basics of the of the physics of it. And you experience it depending on your life experience. Again, so people who travel a lot, beyond uh, multiple time zones, you feel it. Literally, they call it jet lag. Like you get it. You understand it because you're physically, like, you get it. Like, I started my day, woke up in this one place, I traveled on a plane for a little bit, I got off, it was a different day, it was a different time, and you have to adjust to that. But people who don't do that, then it just seems more abstract, right? The same thing though with the thing about the meetings and the scheduling of the time zone. If you're setting a meeting, our natural bias is to think of time based on literally where I physically am at this moment. Like right now, it's daylight where I am. It's the daytime where I'm sitting right now making this program, which, because I do my work in my work hours or during the workday. I understand, like I fully understand that somewhere else on the planet, it's the middle of the night. It's like 3 a.m. I understand that. I fully understand it. But I am not processing my world around me based on that. I'm processing my world around me based on I'm in my office right now. I'm looking out the window. The sun is out. It's a beautiful day. It's very sunny. I live in Las Vegas in Nevada, and it's sunny almost all the time. And it's daylight. So even though I do understand and accept completely that it's 3 a.m. in the middle of the night for somebody somewhere, we're often dark, middle of the night, and if people are on a traditional schedule where they work days and sleep nights, then they're asleep at 3 o'clock in the morning, right? I understand that. It's not like I'm some person who's ignorant of basics of our world, but I'm not processing that. I'm not sitting here making decisions about recording this program, about typing a document I'm going to do in a minute, about taking a coaching client call. None of that is based on the fact that it's 3 a.m. somewhere else. I know it, but it's not how I'm integrating my information and making decisions, because it doesn't apply to me right now. It's 3 a.m. for them wherever they are, and it works the other way. When I lay down to go to sleep, and if I'm working on a schedule where I'm working days and sleeping nights, then when it's my middle of the night, when it's my 3 a.m. and I'm asleep at night, I'm not sitting around thinking, when I wake up, oh, wow, other people, middle of the night here, and I wanted to get a drink of water, middle of the night for me, 3 a.m., but somewhere else, people in the middle of their workday. I don't think about that because it's not relevant. And if I started thinking about all of that, it would very easily distract me from trying to do all of my tasks, whether my task is sleep and rest time or my task is work time or whatever it is. Like, I can't be distracted with, I get it. I understand all this stuff, but how does it, impact my daily decision making? It doesn't. Unless, and here we go. Here's what's happened. Because I work virtually, meaning that I'm very rarely in the same physical space as my work task. I am, of course, when I go and I'm hired or retained to give a corporate education program at a location. Then I fly to that place or drive sometimes if it's local. If I'm giving a lecture or a keynote speech, I'm in that same space. But on my day-to-day basis, I'm actually mostly working with people in different locations. So even for my law practice, it's virtual now. So most of what I do, if not almost all of what I do, is that people have a legal issue and then they retain me and then I work on that and I deliver their legal product, but I'm not physically in the same space with them. My teaching is virtual. So my students are all over the world. My students log in through their hardware and software into our classroom where they access lectures and notes and materials and assignments. And then I post lectures and information. I grade their submissions and I post their work there, and then they access it on their own schedule. So that, again, same type thing. When I do individual coaching and career strategy sessions with community members like yourself, then people are all over the world. So then I do have to sync up. And I am so habituated now, because I've been working like this for a long time. I mean, for years, that every time I write down something, I always put the time zone that I'm referring to. And that's because the way I process information now, because of all the different things I do, so much of it is location independent. I totally understand that when I say 3 p.m., that's meaningless. Because like we just talked about, it's 3 p.m. somewhere, you know, almost all the time. What does that mean? Where is it where I am going to be, and where is it where that other party's going to be? And I've had meetings. I remember when I went to Italy, um, and so I was at the airport. I flew to New York to get on my plane to connect to go to Italy, but I also at that time had a legal case, and I had to have a conference call with some lawyers, and so I was doing that, and then I was trying to calculate how the flight time and then the time zone change for when I would land. I think I was landing in Milan, and then accounting for getting your stuff at the airport, your bags or whatever, and then getting to the hotel, and then when I would be able next to access you know um, any kind of voice uh, information, and then read whatever it is that some documents that were going to be sent over. So there's a lot that goes into that. So it's not only how many hours it is. Part of it was I was not even in the same time zone as the people on the call when I was in New York, because they weren't on East Coast Eastern time. And then I was about to get on a plane for I don't remember how many hours. It's a pretty short flight. And then I'd have to account for the time zone difference, to calculate all the rest of this to say when I could get back to them, right? And I'm just so used to, because it's been over a decade that I've been working like this is my primary mode of work, so I'm really used to this. The challenge though is I interact with people all the time who aren't, right? So somebody will send me an email and it'll just say at a time, whatever, 3 p.m. But I don't know what that means. I know what 3 p.m. means, but I don't know what it means in the context of where they are in the world. So if they are in Kuwait City, then I need to know that. If they are in um, Mexico City, I need to know that. If they're in London, I need to know that. If they're in Edinburgh, I need to know it. And also they need to know where I am, because I could be working from my office in my home base. I could be on a travel assignment or a work assignment. Maybe I'm who knows. So I need to know what day they're talking about. I need to know where they're referring to 3 p.m., what their time zone is, what that means to them, and where they'll be at the day they're talking about. And then I also have to calculate for myself where I will be. And I've cut back immensely on my travel from when I used to travel 250, 300 days a year. But I still travel probably, apparently more than the average person does, according to the data I've seen. So I'm still traveling, and that means I have to recalculate everything based on where I would be on that day that they're asking about, to see what that would mean where they're talking about, so then I can convert it into a local time wherever I would be to be able to access that call. That is something I'm used to all the time, but it slows me down when people don't do their part in the beginning and tell me what time zone they're going to be referring to. And whenever I see things like that, it just is an indicator to me that they're not used to processing data like that. That they're sort of going back to the idea that, well, 3 p.m. wherever I am. The challenge is I don't know where you are. And not only do I not know where you are literally at that moment you wrote the email, but I don't even know where you're going to be on the time that you're referring to in this call, in your note of a future time. Only you know that, right? And it works the other way for them. They don't know if I'm maybe going to be on travel status, or, maybe I'm going to campus for one of the things for the university that I teach for. Who knows? But those are all the parts that I'm used to doing. This is a understanding and an explanation of the situation where something that's really simple, the time zone thing, seems like easy, right? All you have to do is look and see where the person is, what time zone they're in, and then see what number it is they're referring to, and then look and see what that difference between that and where you are, and then calculate it and convert it into a time where you are. And that's easy. It's just basic math. The challenge is, though, that it's not the math of it that's hard. It's the idea of accepting that is that there are more steps than you would traditionally have if everybody was focusing on just one physical time zone. So when you have virtual meetings, which I am a huge fan of, because without them I wouldn't be able to do any of my practices, right? And people they want to schedule these virtual meetings. They have a tendency sometimes, again, just like when somebody will send me an email or something and refer to some 3 p.m., but I don't know what that means. If you want to have a meeting, here's a couple of tips. One, you need to think about who needs to come to the meeting. And we've got a show scheduled in this series upcoming addressing that. So sometimes the problem with the time zones in the virtual meetings is that we don't even really need a meeting. And so that's what's really caused the problem, because we didn't really need the meeting, but we miscalculated that. Now we think we need it, and now we're going to go through all this of trying to create a time that will work synchronously. That's the huge catch here. The core issue with time zone treatment is that everybody needs to be treated with equal respect. So if you don't want to do a meeting at 3 o'clock in the morning, 3 a.m. your time, then do not schedule one for somebody else at 3 a.m. their time. I said it. And part of this challenge is, of course, when you work with organizations where you've got distributed global teams. So let's say I'm in Amsterdam and I'm working with a client, and there are people that are going to be on the call that are in Mexico City. Okay, so in a different time zone. We have a tendency sometimes as humans that we, again, like I said earlier, I'm processing data based on where I am right now. It's daylight where I am right now. So I'm seeing everything that way, and I'm making my plans based on it. When we voluntarily, and I'm assuming that no one was, forced into servitude to be in a position of having virtual meetings with distributed audiences, but when we volunteer for that, you have to change the way you think. You have to shift your thinking. As I gave all those examples, right? When I write something, I always put my time zone I'm referring to. Otherwise, it means nothing. This is something that we all equally have to do, because everyone deserves equal respect. If you actually don't need to have the meeting, a synchronous meeting, then don't have it. And again, those are other shows in this series where we walk through some of that analysis to help you understand that often, if it's very rare, and I mean very rare, where someone says, you know what, we should have had a meeting and we didn't. That's rare. It's much more common that someone says, we had a meeting and we really didn't need it. So since that's often what's an error, then making the decision of do we need a meeting or not, which again is another question, we do another show, is the first part of this. If it comes out that you really do need the meeting, the synchronous meeting, because you could just record whatever material. If you really want to talk or make videos or show presentations, just send the file, and then people can look at it around their own schedule, right? But if you really need a synchronous meeting, and many times you do, when we talk about do I need a meeting at all and those types of topics, I walk through that sometimes you really do need the meeting, and it's important. Once you decide that you need it, then you have to ask a separate question of who's coming. Who's coming to present? Who's coming to share knowledge? Who's coming to listen? And that's another place where people can make errors, because sometimes we think, well, we need to invite all these people, and the reality is that no, we don't. Many of the people on that don't need to be at that meeting at all. And that's another part of the layer decision that we go through, layering, to get to, at the end, a situation where we have a marvelous meeting and we don't have meeting mayhem. So, do we need it at all? Who needs to be invited? Who needs to come? Because those are different topics, once we've moved through those successfully, and we did need it, and we have gotten the list of people that need to come, now we have to understand, this is not an option, we have to understand that every human, and if they're non-human attendees, also those non-human attendees, and yes, because people have meetings sometimes, and maybe they're going to have a pet or an animal, and depending on what you're doing, that may be the nature of what you're doing. Maybe it's a veterinarian meeting, and there's going to be the need to share a video of a certain medical issue regarding, felines or whatever. Stuff like this happens. Okay, all right. All that's to say that for whatever species are attending the meeting, you have to respect time. And if people are on now this is also a thing. Some people are on schedules where they work nights and sleep days. So then that means you respected this. So you respect what the traditional organizational or group schedule is. So if the schedule is, hey, people work nights, people work days. I have many clients that I do work with who are either 24-hour organizations or who work only at night. When that happens, that means that everyone's equal. So here's a couple of things. If you've got people who sleep during the day and work at night, and people who do the opposite, right, who sleep at night and work during the day, you need to have separate meetings. You do not make anyone come at the equivalent of 3 a.m. A 3 a.m. meaning a traditional sleepy time at night. Daytime work means 3 a.m. is the dead of night, right? People are asleep. So you do not say to somebody who sleeps at 3 p.m. because they work at 3 a.m. that they need to come to their equivalent at 3 a.m. You need to have two meetings. You need to have a day shift and a night shift or a swing shift and whatever. And yes, I've done this. I've gone into some of my places where I do corporate training and uh, corporate education programs, and I've done the meeting at 2 o'clock in the morning. Why? Because that's when people that work that shift are awake. And when we've negotiated this and had the discussion about this is not a virtual meeting. This is a physical synchronous meeting geographically. And this is a slightly different issue, although it does relate to time. I've said to people when we're, in those types of negotiations, they'll say, well, I mean, people are just gonna have to like find a way and, just come, even though I know they sleep during the day. And I always say vehemently, no, I'm not gonna even be part of this because it's so disrespectful. The purpose of the meeting is to share knowledge. I cannot share knowledge with you if I'm going to go wake you up at 3 a.m., your equivalent, and then be mad that you didn't pick up any information. Are you serious? So if you have a 24-hour, and a lot of my clients are in hotels, resorts, entertainment, so casino industry, so they are open 24 hours. And people are working all that time and doing stuff. So then that's when I'm there at 2 a.m. and I'm doing my meeting because I need to be. And then I did another one at 2 p.m. or whatever. So, I'll take it and I'll structure it. I'm still going to need to structure my sleep pattern and straddle stuff and plan ahead and prepare myself. But I'm not going to go into a room of people and disrespect them by waking them up at 3 o'clock in the morning, the equivalent of the dead of their sleep. That's just rude. So you may need to have multiple meetings, okay? That's an example of a non-virtual. When we're doing virtual, it's the same idea. The shift thing does matter actually. And the other thing is you have got to remember that everybody equally. So if you're on a thing where everyone, let's say, works days and sleeps nights, you're not going to want to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning for a phone call or a conference call. Then you know what? Then don't ask anybody else. The argument sometimes I hear from people, well, the majority of the team is in the same time zone. It's only like one person or two people who are in the other one. Wait a minute. Hold up. Look. There's no such argument as only one person or two people or it's a small group or the majority of us. Hey. If the organization has determined that we A, did need a meeting, and then B, that we did need to invite these people, then you either have the meeting and invite the people or you don't have the meeting at all for anyone. If those people matter so little to you that you feel like they don't need to share their knowledge, then why are they working there? Right? This is a fundamentally disrespectful issue. And in addition to disrespect, if you don't care about that part of it, here's the thing. You're accomplishing nothing by insisting that somebody's going to come at their equivalent of 3 a.m. And I mean nothing. Because even if they physically came, right, because it was one of the meetings, you insisted it was on a shift that's when they were asleep, but whatever, you insisted your way, or you want to have somebody log on to a conference call or a video call, what are you going to get out of them? The reason I'm harping on the 3 a.m. thing is because that's the most egregious issue with this. The other part of it is everybody has to be flexible. So if you have a distributed attendee list of people that do need to be there, even though you may be on a traditional schedule, maybe let's say that you work 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. in your time zone, and you feel like, hey, I don't want to do anything at 4 p.m. or 4:30 p.m. my time zone. I'm getting ready to leave. Maybe I have a commute, or I'm going to get on the metro or the train or, the ferry, and I don't want to deal with this. You need to understand that everybody has to give equally. So just like nobody's going to be made to do this in the middle of the night at 3 a.m., it also means even though traditionally in your mind, maybe we should do these at, 8 a.m. my time, you're going to have to revisit that and understand you may have to do this at 4 p.m. your time. So sometimes people what's the answer? Here's the answer. Nobody's going to be made in the middle of their night, their sleep time, okay? That's step one. So you need to block out that period. And the healthiest, somewhere around 8 hours, right? So 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. or that equivalent, right? So if it was somebody who slept at night and worked in a traditional daytime. Now, again, there's so many staggered different types of shifts. Some stuff is daytime, but it doesn't start till noon. So you have to adjust this based on the reality of the people who you have determined have a purpose and a need to be at the meeting. You do not just then say, well, you know what, those people have a different work schedule or have a different time zone issue. I just want to invite them. I'll exclude them. If you do that, then you have taught them they don't matter. Then every time we teach people they don't matter, then you can't turn around and complain that people aren't invested in the organization and why aren't they exceptional. You just went ahead and excluded them. Why are you doing this? You have to rethink things. As I said, one of the easy habits I'm into, just because I have to, makes my life easier, is every time I refer to time, I immediately write right next to that what I mean by that, what time zone I'm talking about. And you have to remember, some time zones are off by whole hours, and some of them are off by part of an hour. I know I have staff and contractors and clients, right? So I physically have worked in, I'm just going to use India because it's an easy example. So in India, I physically myself got on a plane, flew there, did work, wonderful, great. I also, though, have ongoing relationships with people there. And so some of the time zones are off by a couple of hours and 30 minutes. So it may be it's 8.5 hours. Okay? And conversely, from the perspective when you're in Mumbai or you're in Bangalore or wherever you are, when you look back to wherever other part of the world, remember, everybody's always oriented on where you are. So they look back and say, well, why are these other people off the half hour? It's all relative. And there's no right or wrong. The only thing that I'm saying that you absolutely do not do is put people in their equivalent of their middle of their sleep pattern, which is going to be predicated on all the stuff I'm talking about. Their regular schedule, their sleep pattern, and then also the time zone they're in. And I've weirdly experienced frustration from people who I think feel like, oh, it's too much hassle, making something a big deal out of nothing. It's not. Meetings are a big deal. They're really important. They're so important we have a whole series on them. We have the whole meeting mayhem series because meetings are this important. And the data shows us the percentage of time that people allocate to meetings is incredibly substantial. This is a global issue. One of my main professional services is giving speeches and presentations and events at meetings. So, this matters. As an attorney, I'm in meetings. Sometimes they're literally a court proceeding, but that's basically a form of a meeting, right? As a professor, it's the same thing. I might be giving a traditional lecture on campus. When I used to teach at the University of Texas at Austin, I might be giving a virtual lecture now. Now, the difference is now they're not synchronous. So I might record a lecture and then place it into my classroom. And then my students, wherever they are in the world, around their schedule, around their sleep schedule, around their time zone, can then come in there and access that same lecture and then use it whenever the time is appropriate for them. It's the synchronous meetings, whether they're in person or virtual, that are the challenge. And the thing is, this is not a problem. It is an opportunity to be able to have people from all different types of either schedules and or time zones to attend the meeting is a good thing. It is an awesome thing. All you have to do to adjust to this is force yourself, when you're looking at calculations, to accept that you are part of an organization or an entity that does have distributed shifts and time zones, which is, again, a good thing. And then all you have to do is remember that you are equal to all the other people. So exactly the same as you're not going to want to be, because it's not going to work. I can get somebody up in the middle of their sleep period, their 3 a.m. equivalent. I can make them do it. The thing is, they can't contribute that's worth anything, just the biology of it. I was asleep, and it's the middle of my sleep. And the other thing is, when you throw off somebody's sleep like that and you say you're going to do this in the equivalent of their middle of the night, then their whole rest of their work is messed up too, because now you took them out of their block of sleep time and made this interaction thing. And now I don't know what the expectation is, that they go back to sleep. And that, no, now the whole rest of their day is sort of off by this. So why would we do this? So we're not. So you need to have a block of time. Depending on how many schedules, how many time zones, and other issues you're facing, you're going to have to take the same rule. My suggestion strongly is at least about 8 hours. So the equivalent of 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. And you just roll that 8 hours around depending on where people are. Then you have to go through, and this is not anything but awesome, and find the windows where it matches up, where nobody's going to be in that time frame. If you are not able to do that, if you try and you say, oh, we almost got it, but there's a few people and it's 3 a.m. for them, then you know what you have to do? You have to have 2 meetings. Or 4, however many you need to have. As I said earlier, it wasn't a virtual meeting, but I said earlier I was on the client site and I did stuff during the day and I did stuff at 2 o'clock in the morning. Why? Because I needed to meet the needs of the people that work there and that need to come to the meeting and be alert and have a good time. So that's what we did. If you're looking at it and you think, oh goodness, well, it's almost going to work, but there's that one person, and there's some time zones. I know Hawaii, U.S. state of Hawaii, which is 3 hours behind the Pacific West Coast time zone, and I have a lot of people that I work with, and myself also have worked in and enjoy Hawaii, even considering it potentially for additional future home base. And people will say, well, they're an outlier. Well, no, there aren't. They're on the globe. So, you know what? Equally respected. If you cannot find a single time that'll work, right? Then what that tells you is you're going to have at least 2 meetings or however many you need. And if there are only one or a few people that you have to go to the second meeting, well, then fine. That's fine. But you have to have it. Meetings are marvelous. Meetings are so fundamental to our organizational success. The reality is that technology has allowed us to have the expertise and the talents of people in distributed shifts and distributed locations around the world. All of that's great. If you have a calendaring input or responsibility, you are not allowed to do any scheduling that is going to impede that block of time. It's the equivalent of a regular healthy sleep pattern. So I gave you, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. or midnight to 6 a.m. The equivalent of that, okay? Now, if you have people in 6 time zones and 4 different shifts, will this take a little bit of logistical planning? Yes. Yes. Do you benefit by having people in 6 time zones and 4 shifts? Yeah, you do. Your organization does. Because I'm able to work for a university that's innovative and I can have students around the world, that's why my university is able to have the reach and the scope of programs they have. It's awesome. And have the administrators and faculty and administrative support and students from all over the world. That's why it's so awesome. Because I'm able to practice my professions as a lawyer and doing corporate training and my programs for people around the world, it's awesome. This is all good. There's nothing negative at all. If I was restricted back when I mentioned in the story, before the personal computer, before obviously the smartphone, before the car, if I had just to limit all of my businesses and my things that are my passions like teaching, just to, if you're not physically in this town and can drive to this campus or bicycle to this campus, they won't be in my class. How sad would that be? In terms of limiting opportunity. How sad would it be if I couldn't hire people to work for my firms that are really talented from all over the world? How sad would it be if I couldn't share this program with you all over the world? That I can record and create from anywhere in the world and then distribute so that everyone that has access to the internet can be part of our community. What a waste. How sad that would be. This is an awesome, good, marvelous thing to have. Virtual meetings and to have distributed time zone team members and to have distributed shifts. All it means is great. We have more opportunity to reach more people. We have more opportunity to hire the best people and retain the best people and have more talent. We also, in many ways, control our costs, right? We can either maximize revenue by opening up our services and opportunities to people at different times and 24/7 around the world. And we can also then spread out and lower potentially our overhead by having people from all over different distributed places be contributing to our organization. This is a win-win at every level. There's not a single thing about this that's a negative. Yes, it requires a slight addition in your thinking process to remember that time is relative. It's relative. And so when you write something down, just write down what you mean by that. And then when you're getting ready to have a meeting, if you don't know the time zones people are in, do not guess. Ask them. Because remember, that also fluctuates. Maybe somebody normally is based in Montreal in Canada, but maybe at the time, the day you want to have this meeting, they're going to be in, uh, Brazil and in a different time zone. So look, ask, confirm the time zone and or shifts that people are on, and then you just sit down and make your different options and see if there's anything that is in that window where nobody is in the equivalent of their middle of the night 3 a.m. If you are not able to do this, then you cannot have a synchronous meeting. You're not going to exclude in your mind, well, those people, it's only a few. No, that is so fundamentally offensive. So what you're going to do then is have multiple meetings if you need the synchronous meetings. Now, if you can have an asynchronous meeting, just have an asynchronous meeting. Like I said, one of the beauties of what I'm able to do is record content, like in this program, and then people can access it whenever it's convenient for them. And that's what I do for my clients in many instances, and that's what I do with my students, and that's what I'll do in many instances. If it needs to be synchronous, like for example, when I do executive coaching, individual private career strategy sessions with people, then all this planning goes into it. Okay, well, let's look at this date. Okay, what time zone would you be in? What kind of shift are you on? So what hours would work for you? And then yes, I take those extra steps to see what lines up. If there's nothing on a certain date that lines up, if we never have any agreement on a certain date that'll work for both people, then we move to another date. Do you see? But I need to be flexible too. Like I said earlier, I cannot think, well, I'm only going to do this in the times I'm used to. I said that you're not going to plan it between, midnight, 6 a.m., 11 p.m., 7 a.m., the healthy sleep time, the equivalent thereof. But you may have to do something at 7 p.m. your time. So even though you may say, well, that's not fair. I'm used to leaving. I leave at 5 p.m. my time. Well, no, because it's a distributed team, then you're going to have to maybe have this at 7 p.m. so that other people can be on at a reasonable time. And one of the things that I really, again, the university, and I'm fortunate enough to be on the faculty, is a global university, and we have people around the world, physically around the world, and we have people virtually conducting business. And one of the things they do really well is they always will have meetings where if they're asynchronous, where they'll record and then globally share the information so everybody can have it. If it's synchronous, they'll set it at a time so it's again not in the red zone. The red zone is the middle of the night equivalent for people, and they will, from where they will understand that they are going to be flexible, and so maybe wherever they are, they'll say, okay, maybe it's 7 p.m. at night or in the evening, but I'll do this because that way it's a time that allows everybody else around the world to be at this very important meeting, and I want them to understand how equally valued and important they are, and they're great at that. That's a great example. But as I said, I do this in my businesses every day, and most of you, my community members, do. But we have to talk about this because apparently there continue to be isolated instances where people don't take the time to think it's not just about me. The world doesn't revolve around me. The world's revolving and other people are on it too. It is moving, and we're all maybe in different time zones or different shifts. And all I have to do is ask, confirm what the time zones and shifts are, and then go find things that are not in the red zone. If I can't find anything in the red zone, I either need to record the content and then distribute it, so that's fair, so everybody gets it asynchronously, or I need to have multiple sessions of the meeting to make sure that everybody's able to come at a convenient time. It's not in the red zone. But I will never put anything in the red zone, because if you do that, it teaches the people that they don't matter at all. And it also prevents them the ability to get the whole purpose of the meeting, which is to share knowledge. I can't learn something if it's the equivalent of my 3 a.m. because I'm asleep. Even if I was, forced to wake up and log into the call, I can't process anything. If you've ever been woken up in the middle of your equivalent of your 3 a.m., you know what that's like. And most of us, the only time that happens, if there's some, goodness gracious, we hope it never happens, but an emergency, right? Oh my goodness, great grandma's in the hospital. That's why we got the phone woke us up at that time. Other than that, it doesn't happen because it's so jarring and it throws off. Again, we all know that experience. Whenever it's ever happened to us, it's awful. And that's why this is a really important issue. So remember, reframe it. All of this is a good. I'm happy we have computer hardware. I'm happy we have internet utilities that allow us to access the internet. I am thrilled we have software. I am glad that the hardware and the software and the access, broadband and high-speed internet continues to evolve so that we can have more ubiquitous access to content. I love meetings. I really do, because I love sharing knowledge. All that requires is that every one of us, all of us have to make these little modifications. So when you say something or you write something referred to a time, you have to define what that means, because it's meaningless without that. Where are you referring to? What time zone? What does that mean? And then you have to remember that other people equally have the same rights you and I have. To sleep, to work, to be respected. And then you ask people and you confirm the time zones and the attendees, and you find stuff that's not in the red zone. That may mean that you're going to have to slightly do something a little earlier or a little later than you traditionally like to, but that's okay. It's still not in your red zone. Everybody sacrifices a little bit, and this is a win-win. The only time this doesn't work is when there's a decision, well, we'll just not have the meeting at all. And then people really needed that knowledge. Or you'll say, well, we'll just exclude the people that are on that shift or that time zone. Well, that taught them they don't matter. That's the most offensive thing we can do. We're not going to ever do that. Or we're going to have multiple meetings. So the solutions are simple. And what's the outcome of taking these extra steps? To think and remember that I'm going to clarify what I mean when I use time, because it's, again, totally random and meaningless without that clarification. What does it mean? And then I'm going to respect other people. Just because someone says, oh, okay, well, I guess I'll be the one to be on the call at 3 a.m. Just because they'll do it doesn't mean that it's appropriate. It's not. It's never. So again, what do? We have the red zone. So somebody's asleep, depending on their schedule and time zone. We do not ever use, right? That's 7-8 hour period, 6 if you have to. The midnight to 6 a.m. equivalent. And then outside of that, we're going to all be a little flexible. So maybe someone says, I don't really like to do a meeting at 7 a.m. my time, but I'll do it. Because that's not unreasonable, right? Or someone says, I really didn't want to do something at 9 p.m., but okay, it's not unreasonable. That was still my regular wake time. It was nowhere near the start of my red zone, so that's fine, right? We all make a little bit of accommodation so that everyone is able to share knowledge, which was the purpose of the meeting. And I love being on meetings when someone says, oh, good morning. Another person says, oh, good night. Because for one person, it's 7 a.m. And for another person, it's 9 p.m. That's cool. That's great. You know why? Because I wouldn't have the opportunity to have those people and share that knowledge and better my profession or my life if it wasn't for the technology that allows me to do that. And I am grateful and I am happy. So this is a good thing. It is never anything other than a positive. We just have to remember that we have to just tweak our communication and our frame mentally so that we understand and are constantly reminding ourselves that it's just a relative issue. So define what I mean, and then remember, red zone, big X through that. You never book anything in anybody's red zone. Everybody needs to be willing to be flexible, okay, outside the red zone. So maybe, like I said, it's a little earlier than I would like, or maybe it's a little later, but it's not in my red zone. So we're all going to give a little. And then it may be that we have such a diversity, there was nothing that would meet everybody, so we're going to have to then have multiple sessions. So the key, of course, is everyone is equally respected. So if it's asynchronous, everyone's equally respected because it's perfect. If it has to be synchronous, then everyone has to be equally respected. So that's why I shared, as I said, when I worked on the shift, and I've done this numerous times, but I just used that one example where I was doing it at 2 a.m. and I had also done a day event. That's why I was doing it, because we have to have multiple events, because that way we respect everyone equally, and that's fair and that's correct. Because then we can share knowledge and have fantastic meetings. It doesn't, again, it's all relative. So I'm thrilled that we've entered into this series. I'm beyond thrilled to have the life and the opportunity. This program, just the opportunity for me to be able to record and disseminate and share this program, it is one of the most seemingly miraculous parts of my life. I'm so grateful to be able to teach students and scholars around the world is just an honor. To be able to practice law, irrespective of the other geographic issues in my life, is an honor. I am so grateful, and I'm so excited to see what continues to evolve to allow us, you and I, to learn, to meet, to know, to share, to have employment and careers that are dynamic and interesting. I'm so grateful. So yes, it's a little bit of an extra modification of tweaking how we think and just getting in those habits. Okay, right? Everyone's equal. And then get out there and be, I'm, again, just nothing but grateful that I have the opportunities. And I'm so happy. So I'm delighted to make the adjustments and think slightly different about time so that we can get the best opportunities. And I'm certain you feel the same way. But this had to be addressed because one of the reasons we started this series was to make sure we don't have any more meeting mayhem, right? We're here to eradicate meeting mayhem, and that this issue with time zones and and or shift differentials and things like that, really, really, really important. We have some easy action items, right? Never in the red zone. If we can't find anything that meets everybody not in the red zone, then we'll have multiple sessions, and everybody's got to be flexible. So if it's not in the red zone, I understand it's a little bit early, a little bit late, but you're still not in your red zone. Then everyone equally has to give a little, okay? And the beauty of this, of course, is you have the challenge of a life that is dynamic and opportunities that are plentiful. And so the little modifications to address the logistics of this is completely worthwhile. And get out there and have some more marvelous meetings. Thank you for being part of the program.